What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and we had football scattered all throughout last week. We had the Thanksgiving games, we had the game on Friday, we had the games on Sunday, the game last night. We got a lot of football to talk about today, and that's why I'm here to give you my top 10 lessons learned from week 13 as we look forward to week 14. This is where I break down all of my favorite usage, stats, data, trends, the rookie running back carousel, the world famous rookie receiver report, everything you need to win your league, beat your league mates, stay on top of what's going on in the NFL without spending hours scrolling box scores or reading articles. Everything you need to know is in this video. As always, if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and of course, our first lesson learned or takeaway from this week is the world famous rookie receiver report sponsored by Underdog. Of course, when you use promo code RON and you play $5, you get $100 in bonus funds. You'll get a gimme pick'em in the pick'em lobby as well for their hires and lowers. I'm sure that there's going to be plenty of promos between now and Christmas. You get the battle royales, you get the drafts for football, basketball, hockey across the board on Underdog. Make sure you check that out in the description and the comment section down below and use promo code RON. Now, when we talk about the rookie receiver report, at this point, you guys should be seasoned veterans, but I will break it down. This is every rookie receiver with 90 or more routes run. Of course, if you do not see a rookie receiver on this list, they either did not run 90 or more routes this season, or they are playing on Monday Night Football, or they have an injury. Now, we have, of course, the route percentage by week. We want to see these players running 90% or more of the routes on pass plays. That makes them a full-time player in their offense. Targets per out run, that is your volume on a per out basis. Anything over 20% is really good. Yards per out run, your yards on a per out basis, your efficiency. Anything over 2 is an elite number. First downs per out run, are you not only being efficient or earning volume, are you also moving the chains in your offense? Anything over 10% is an elite number. And then PFF grade. How do the guys over at PFF think you look on the field? Anything over 80 is kind of the golden number. If you hit 80 plus, you are going to be a superstar in the NFL. Guys like OBJ has done this, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin. A lot of really good players as rookies hit that number. We used to have Tedero McMillan in that bunch, but he has now slipped down to 77.9. Now, we sort this by the week 13 route percentage here. And the first player we'll talk about is Emeka Egbuka. This is a tough one. We loved him in the offseason. Through 5 weeks, he was a smash, a league winner, a guy you drafted in like round, in sharp leagues that we stream on here. Maybe that's more like round 4, 5. In home leagues, maybe that's more like round 6, 7, 8. And man, it's been so tough to even try and understand what's going on here because I really don't have a rhyme or reason. Through 5 weeks, he was at 20 plus points per game, and his biggest issue was that he was efficient scoring fantasy points, but he wasn't getting sustainable volume. We now have had the opposite issue since week 6, where he has now had 8 or more targets in each game since week 7. Prior to week 7, over that first 5-game span when he was crushing, he only had 8 or more targets in 2 of those 5 games. So he was actually a better producer on less volume, and now that he's the number 1 receiver on this team, getting tons of volume, the production isn't there. And I have a really tough time saying, well, he is without Mike Evans. He can't operate as a true number 1 wide receiver. And maybe that's true, but he's getting open. He's getting targets, right? It'd be one thing if Evans went and then he wasn't getting targets, but he's still getting volume. He's still getting open. He's still being treated as this offense's number 1 wide receiver. This is a pretty solid offense with Baker Mayfield. It hasn't been amazing recently. And we're now at a spot here where he's had 8 or more targets, again, in each game since week 7. And yet, since week 7, he's only been over 10 PPR points once. His 23.6% targets per out run is the best on this entire list. And we know volume is more sticky year to year. It's more predictive than efficiency. It's just we're at a point now where we need to start seeing some efficiency and some production, right? We can't, I can't feed my kids or score points in my fantasy lineup with a 23.6% targets per out run. It's impressive, but it's not production. We're now dipping yards per out run under Tedero McMillan. It's still 1.89 is not terrible. This first downs per out run number is pretty concerning. Only pretty concerning in the aspect of being a true elite wide receiver in the NFL. Maybe we got over our skis, but I'm still pretty firm on him as a top 12 wide receiver in Dynasty. At worst, when we're talking redraft, I still think he's a low-end wide receiver too, at absolute worst. When you have a guy attached to Baker Mayfield getting 8+ targets every week since week 7, you probably don't have the luxury to sit him. Like, I'm still starting all my Emeka Ibuka shares. Is it definitely getting frustrating? Is it definitely annoying? Sure. He's not losing you weeks, but he's just not... The magic he had early in the season is just kind of gone right now. I could see him bounce back in a big way for the fantasy playoffs, but I don't know. Wide receivers get hot and cold. There were times this year where A.J. Brown was frustrating. Now he's been great. Cortland Sutton was on a bit of a cold streak, and then last night he scores a touchdown, and he was pretty solid. So wide receivers are weird. I wish I could give you more of a rhyme or reason as to why this is happening. But as long as he's going to command 8+ targets per game, I'm going to find it really tough to not have him in my weekly top 25 in terms of starts at wide receiver. After that, we're just going to go straight down the list. We have Isaac Tesla, who runs 94% of the routes purely because Amon-Ra St. Brown gets hurt in this game. Isaac Tesla, huge red flags right now. You can see it. In terms of all these guys who are playing a lot of routes here, he is by far red across the board. You can see 0.65 yards per route run is the worst among all the players you can see on this list right now. That is awful. 6.5% targets per route run, awful. 3.9% first downs per route run. His PFF grade has gone down. Yes, did he have some cool catches in the preseason and early in the year? Yes. But man, this is just not really going. He doesn't seem like a true difference maker in the NFL when it comes to production. If you want to say, well, Jameson Williams is there, well, Jahmyr Gibbs is there, it's tough, man. Amon-Ra St. Brown goes down. Sam Laporta isn't healthy at this point in time, and all he could get was 2 targets, and he was out-targeted and out-produced by a guy they signed off the street, Tom Kennedy. Tough, you know. I wish I had something better for Isaac Tesla. I have plenty of him in Dynasty. Definitely a guy I took some shots on late in best ball drafts. I don't think that he's going to really be a guy. Like, he feels, in terms of like round 3 wide receivers who like just don't do anything, he just feels like very Jalen Tolbert is one you could kind of point to, Devontae Walker. We have Harold Fannin here. He led the Cleveland Browns in routes run here. He completely dominated this passing game. He is second behind only Emeka Ibuka at this point with like 23% target per route run as a tight end. And I think that you just have to look at these metrics, right? 1.59 yards per route run, 6.9% first downs per route run through 2 lenses. 1, him being a tight end, and 2, him being a rookie on the Cleveland Browns, right? So he's in a terrible offense as a tight end, and his per route metrics are going toe-to-toe with a lot of these wide receivers. So Harold Fannin's one of these guys. I think it was Dwayne McFarland had this tweet over the weekend of, here is like 5 players I'm fairly certain if they were on different teams would be superstars right now. I think Josh Downs is one of those players. He had Harold Fannin there, and I very much agree. If he was on like one of the top 15 offenses in the NFL, I think that we would view him very similarly to Tyler Warren. He is that good on a individual basis. He's just in one of the worst offenses in the NFL attached to Shedeur Sanders. So it's tough for him. Like in his best games where he's running 90% plus of the routes and scoring a touchdown, he's doing it with like 3 catches on the day. And it's just kind of brutal because I know in another situation, Fannin would be doing a lot better, but you could also make the case, well, Harold Fannin was kind of this tweener in college. Would anybody not named Kevin Stefanski be giving him this much playing time or having him run this many routes and not kind of marginalizing him? It's a good question. But yeah, he had 3 catches, 43 yards, and a touchdown. He now has 40 or more yards in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his last 7. 3 touchdowns over 3 touchdowns since week 5. I mean, that'll play in this offense, but yeah, like he would be absolutely smashing if not for this offense. Then you have Tetairoa McMillan. If you want to complain about Tetairoa McMillan, I suppose you can, but he's been great this year. He's been amazing. And even in a dud game for him where he's not this hyper-targeted player like he's been all year, he still gives you, on his only catch, it's for 43 yards and a touchdown. If you're going to catch only 1 ball in a game, go 43 yards and score a touchdown. So he wasn't a dud in your lineup. He played against the Rams, so I think that it's completely fine that defense is really strong, and he didn't have an amazing game. But he still didn't give you a dud in your lineup. I will say, again, getting under that 80 PFF grade does suck, but he still has plenty of games, or not plenty of games, really. 4 to 5 games to get that straightened back out. He is on bye this week. We can mention the Tennessee Titans here, right? So Io Manor, Chamir Dike, and our guy Gunnar Helm here. It's really tough when you lose 25-3 versus the Jaguars with 141 passing yards. You're just not going to get much production for these receivers. Gunnar Helm did lead the team with 7 targets. Chig Okonkwo got banged up during the week, but he ended up playing this game. So Gunnar Helm wasn't like fully unleashed in this game, but again, leads the team with 7 targets. Nothing really from the receivers. Someone who didn't make the rookie receiver report was Xavier Restrepo. He ran a few routes. He had 1 catch. Nothing really to be all that excited about. Then we can talk about Tyler Warren. This Colts offense is starting to get a little bit spooky with Daniel Jones having his fractured fibula or whatever he has going on. They have played against the Chiefs and then the Texans in the last 2 weeks. So those are 2 pretty solid defenses. I mean, the Chiefs got carved up by the Cowboys, but the Cowboys have been carving up everybody in terms of how good their offense is rolling right now. So you can look through a couple different lenses. Is Tyler Warren scored a touchdown in a week where his status was up in the air due to illness. But I think it's understandable to be a little bit concerned about like what Tyler Warren looks like in this offense moving forward. I think that he's going to be fine, right? But there was a moment in time during the season where he was like the tight end 2 rest of season, and could he be this elite difference maker? I think now he's probably just like a fine, like in any given week, he's going to be like the tight end 6 or the tight end, 7 or 8 in rankings, and I think that's fine for where you drafted him, but he's no longer this like massive advantage. I still think his individual stats are amazing. In Dynasty, he's a top 3 tight end, no questions asked. It's just tough. This offense is taking a hit with Daniel Jones' injury, and then also they have the Jaguars next week, then Seattle, then San Francisco, and then the Jaguars again. The Jaguars aren't terrible against the pass. Like, you can still put up production there, but divisional games are a little bit tricky. And then also Seattle and San Fran, those defenses have been heating up here recently. This is actually huge. This is a guy we'll talk about tomorrow on the waiver wire video. Pat Bryant, a little bit of a post-bye rookie bump here. 64% of the routes, bye week, 77% of the routes. And his per out metrics look bad, but they looked so much worse like 4 weeks ago. And he's steadily improving every single week. He had a season-high 77% route share. That was ahead of Troy Franklin, ahead of Marvin Mims. He also had more targets than Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims. He had 7 targets behind only Evan Ingram in this game when it comes down to the Broncos receivers. Really impressive stuff from him. He didn't hit 40 or more yards until week 8. And then since week 8, he's hit 40-plus yards in 4 of those 5 games since week 8. So super, super impressive from Pat Bryant. I wasn't convinced that he was a good player for a minute there, but he's showing life here as like, he might be the last call. We keep looking for him. Is there going to be a Jaden Reed, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Rashee Rice style, Jalen McMillan last year, Ladd McConkey? Can we find a rookie receiver off the beaten path, right? We all know about Ibuka. We all know about Tedero McMillan. Is there going to be one of these guys who emerges as a league winner down the stretch? I'm not confident it's going to be Pat Bryant, but he's certainly thrown his hat in the ring as an option. After that, we have Oronde Gadsden, who I assume people are a little bit concerned about, right? His route share dips down to 68%. He hasn't been great for fantasy, right? Where when we look at his game logs, he had 3.7 PPR points this week, 6.1 in week 11, 4.3 the week before that. He hasn't been producing really since week 9. But what I will say is he gets hurt in week 10, first game after injury in week 11, bye week, comes back this week, and you have a couple of things working against him here. One, Justin Herbert gets hurt in this game and misses a decent chunk of it for Trey Lance. On top of that, it's a game where they don't have Joe Alt, they don't have Rashawn Slater. That's been the case the entire year, but you're going up against Max Crosby. So you're going to want to opt for more of your blocking tight ends, right? Your Will Dissly, your Tyler Conklin. On top of that, they beat the hell out of the Raiders and just ran the ball. Kamani Vidal had a ton of yards. Jarrett Patterson even got in the end zone. So there just wasn't really a need for Gadsden to run that many routes. They just were opting for blocking tight ends and running the ball, and then Herbert was hurt. So I have a tough time really being like, oh, Gadsden's fallen off or this is his new role. I think he's going to be fine moving forward as a low-end tight end 1 at worst. Then we can bounce around here a little bit. We have the Bears guys. We have Colston Loveland. This is going to be where he caps out. I think 65% of the routes is about right when you have Cole Kmet in the mix, which is a bit of a bummer. His pro metrics look amazing. I love Colston Loveland in Dynasty. In redraft, he's a boom-bust streaming tight end that you just hope falls in the end zone. He did have a team high, or a tied for team high, 6 targets in this game. So he's very much a focal point as like a part-time player. And that's very much the same idea with Luther Burden, who also had 6 targets, tied for the team high here. Right in this area of like 50 to 60% of the routes, which is good. Good on a per route basis. But it's tough. This team just kind of spreads things around. That's why Rome Odunze's been disappointing. The highest target total on this team was 6 targets in this game versus the Eagles. They ran the ball a ton, and they spread things out. They want to get Burden involved. They want to get Loveland involved, but they do so on a part-time basis, and it just kind of ends up being a very flat distribution across the board in this offense, and it has been frustrating for fantasy. I don't know that Burden or Loveland ever get unleashed in this situation here. Then we can talk about Jaden Higgins. This one has been so frustrating. Thursday night, he looks great against the Bills. You think that maybe this is going to be, are we going to unleash him? No, we're still stuck in this like 60% route area. His pro metrics are really climbing here. He's playing better and better every week. He's had 10 or more PPR points in 4 of his last 6. He had 5 catches for 65 yards against the Colts in this game. He just has to run more routes to be anything more than a boom-bust flex play, and the Texans have been so stubborn. Same deal with Jalen Noel, though in this game, still stuck at like 30 to 40% of the routes in this game. Didn't even register a target. His per route metrics are actually starting to fall a little bit here. So I now think that Jaden Higgins is ahead of him on the depth chart and the better bet in all formats. Jalen Noel starting to kind of teeter out a little bit here. I did want to touch on Tez Johnson. He goes from 97% to 84% to 54%. Pretty much a direct correlation to Chris Godwin's increased involvement since coming back from injury, which now kind of makes Tez Johnson not that interesting. You can cut him in redraft, and Dynasty is a fun player, but he went from somebody I had hopes could be like the next Tank Dell or something, and we're just kind of keeping it with the Texans. He's really kind of more maybe like Kiki Kuti, and I'm not really saying that from a stance of player archetype. He is not the PPR machine that Kiki Kuti was, but just of like player who's maybe just a flash in the pan. We'll see how this sort of pans out for Tez Johnson, but that's kind of my read on it at this point in time. Then we can talk about Jack Besh, the final receiver we'll touch on here. 50% of the routes, I will say Dante Thornton does get banged up in this game, so that might have been a big factor here. He gets, I think, 2 catches, 22 yards. Both of the catches were first downs. He looked okay. His pro metrics are okay. I don't know. Jack Besh is in the danger zone right now. In my write-up, I said, like, Jack Besh is firmly in the area of like maybe being a dynasty trivia question in 5 years if he doesn't show us something down the stretch of this season, but maybe that is coming here soon. Now, after the rookie receiver report, we're going to dive right into our second takeaway, the rookie running back carousel. And it's honestly just the order that I outlined these things. This is what came up next for me when I was doing research this morning. When we talk about the rookie running back carousel, we will start at the top with Ashton Jeanty. It's a similar idea. Snap shares, points per game, PPR per touch is your efficiency. PFF grade is how do you look on film. Ashton Jeanty now has 8 targets in 3 straight games. He had 20-plus touches in this game against the Chargers. He only gave you 12 PPR points, but that's kind of what happens when he doesn't score a touchdown. And that's just kind of his floor. He has a great role on a bad team, and that's just sort of what it is. It is good to see 96% snap share with this new play caller. It means that at the very least, Jeanty is going to be a focal point of this offense. Then after that, we can talk about Devin Neal. Next up, 81% of the snaps in this game. I was right and wrong. You guys know in the waiver wire video last week, I wasn't super pumped about Devin Neal. And he only puts up 9.9 PPR points. He wasn't amazing, but he did get 17 touches. He did get an 81% snap share. It's a decent role. Ryan Heath kind of expanded on it here, saying the Saints backfield plus Taysom Hill in their first full game without Kamara. Devin Neal, 70% of backfield carries, 7.8% target share. Evan Hull had 25% of the backfield carries. Taysom Hill had 1 carry and 1 target. By usage, Neal's an unexciting RB3. Hill looks like nothing. And I agree, but like 17 touches, you put him in your RB2 spot, and maybe he's going to give you, 8 to 12 PPR points in a given week. I guess that has its utility off the waiver wire. I just wouldn't be drooling over it. Then we can talk about Quinshon Judkins, 62% of the snaps. I think that that's a little bit inflated since Dylan Sampson got banged up in this game, but if it is a long-term injury, that should give Judkins more playing time moving forward, and that would be obviously a good thing. Now, when it comes to Quinshon Judkins, I just want to make this note because it's very easy to look at his box score and right? If I pull it up here, you can look at Judkins' box score as somebody who has Judkins, is starting him every week, and you're like, man, 23 carries for 91 yards, less than a 4 yards per carry. He hasn't hit 4 or better yards per carry since week 5. And you're telling me 26 touches gets you 15.9 PPR points, and it's just like, take a step back for a second. He's on the Browns. And that's just kind of the sad reality of the situation is, again, that he's on the Browns. This is a tweet I put out earlier where I looked at NFL Next Gen stats. He leads the NFL in percentage of runs with 8 or more defenders in the box, 45.2% of the time. No other running back is dealing with that 40% or more of the time. Despite being 30th with a 3.9 yards per carry, he's 16th with 0.67 rushing yards over expected per attempt. So they're stacking the box. They're not blocking well, but he is still performing over expectations. And next offseason, when we dig into his explosive run rate and his yards per carry and his yards after contact or any of those metrics, you got to be forgiving here. You cannot just put Judkins in this box of, oh, well, he's kind of inefficient. Kind of reminds me of like Joe Mixon. No, like the only reason that he's been inefficient is because this situation of the bad offense and a bad offensive line, it's a brutal spot. So yes, is he getting 20 plus touches and not really giving you big blow up games? Sure, but I would be very hesitant to say that it's his fault. I think that he's been very good when kind of adjusting for the context of this offense. Then we can talk about Woody Marks. He gets banged up in this game. Didn't really look like himself. He had 20 opportunities in this game. Didn't really score a ton of points. He kind of needs to get receiving work or score a touchdown to have a good game or be efficient. The issue with him is that he's not a very efficient runner between the tackles, which is what was expected. This was a guy who came out of college as a receiving back out of Mississippi State and then USC. I think as a sophomore at Mississippi State, he had like 80 catches. The last 3 weeks, his receiving totals have been 1 catch, 7 yards, 1 catch, -5, 1 catch, 3 yards, which I find baffling. So he has 19 carries for 64 yards in this game. They beat the Colts, obviously, but this was not the usage any of us really saw for Woody Marks. I think it's the wrong way to use him. I mean, of course, any running back that's going to get 20 touches deserves to be in lineup consideration, but if you're curious why Woody Marks hasn't really been producing much, is because that's not really his game, and he hasn't been scoring touchdowns. Against the Bills last week, I think it was against the Bills, he gets subbed out on the goal line. So it's just been very weird for Woody Marks, but he's like a fine high-end RB3 moving forward. We can touch on RJ Harvey as well. This one's tough to swallow. If I'm being completely honest, he got bailed out by overtime in scoring 2 touchdowns. So he scored the first touchdown, then whole game looks pretty mid. Overtime happens, he scores another touchdown. So that really got him to produce like 20 plus PPR points. He was very strong in fantasy, but in terms of like his box score, not very good. 13 carries for 35 yards. He had 3 catches, 27 yards. So his roll came down. JJ Zacharyson points that out here. 47% of the snaps and a 29% route share compared to his only other game without J.K. Dobbins of 61% snap rate and a 48% route share. Then we look at his efficiency metrics from Ian Hartitz here. 38th in yards per carry, 40th in yards after contact per rush, 46th in tackles avoided per rush, 47th in explosive rate, success rate, 41st, PFF rush grade, 45th. So he has just been kind of brutal this year. We'll see. It's a decent role for as long as J.K. Dobbins is out. He's just like fully getting there on touchdowns right now, right? He had 2 touchdowns this week. He had a touchdown in week 9. He had 3 touchdowns in week 8. He had a touchdown in week 7, a touchdown in week 4. That's kind of it. We only have 2 games over 50 rushing yards. We're still waiting on something to really come through here. I'd have some real concerns in Dynasty of him being like this 24-year-old prospect, which is a pretty big red flag. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe Sean Payton has a plan here over these next few weeks. He does get a little bit of a bounce back on the road versus Vegas, where we just saw Kamani Vidal and Jarrett Patterson run wild. Maybe that happens for RJ Harvey, but as of right now, he's kind of just a role more than a producer. Then you have Kyle Monangai. He goes nuts. But I will say, I wouldn't go crazy, right? 45% snap share. Why he got so many touches and so much volume is there's a couple of things at play here. You can see from Hayden Winks' tweet, you can see it was just kind of drive by drive when it came down to Monangai versus DeAndre Swift. So very much a 50-50 split, drive by drive. They were both gashing the Eagles. And the reason why he went so nuts is, one, because the run game was working so well. So when you're moving the ball efficiently. You're marching down the field. You're doing all of that. 22 carries for 130 rushing yards and a touchdown. That's huge. But the reason Monangai got 22 carries on just 45% of the snaps is because they had 87 total snaps in this game. Now, most normal games, you're going to have like 60 to 70 snaps on offense. So there were just so many snaps because they kept sustaining long drives. They kept also stopping the Eagles. And it just ended up being them running all over the Eagles. Now, I'm not really trying to pour cold water here. I'm just saying what looked like maybe a takeover. It wasn't a takeover, but it is very much a Walker Charbonnet style split where this is going to be 1A, 1B here. Monangai is going to be startable. This isn't going to be the norm moving forward of 20 plus carries and all of this, but he has had 10 plus PPR points in 5 of his last 7 and is a fine flex play moving forward or like an RB2 guy. The issue is that you have to brace for the Packers next week, then the Browns, then the Packers again, and then the 49ers. That is your fantasy football rest of season schedule for the Bears, which is definitely tough. The last rookie running back we'll talk about, and I'll show all of the running backs here if you want to look at them, is Basil Tootin. He scores a touchdown here. It's his 3rd touchdown in his last 5 games. He had 2 carries inside of the 5 in this game on 2 different drives. So I don't know that I'd call him the goal line back, but he's certainly getting used there as kind of the de facto goal line back. So Basil Tootin is interesting. I think in Dynasty he's fine, but I would not be starting him anytime soon. Now on to the rest of this video. We can talk through the 3rd takeaway, which is Joe Burrow returns. Now, Joe Burrow in this game, I will say a big disclaimer on the Ravens is anything you look at is going to say the Ravens defense on a whole or on the whole isn't that good. But if you just shorten the sample to since week 6, that's a pretty big sample size, right? Since week 6, they have been the 5th best EPA per play defense. The Ravens defense has been really solid since week 6. Now, in this game, Joe Burrow wasn't perfect, but 261 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, is kind of perfect and all you can really expect from Joe Burrow in his first game back. I think that we should be excited for when T. Higgins returns. I will say they also have a tough schedule rest of the way. Buffalo, Baltimore, Miami, Arizona, Cleveland. I guess Miami and Arizona are the only 2 there that don't really scare me a ton, but like Baltimore, Miami's actually been better as of recently. Arizona's always a little bit feisty, but the Bengals defense should allow some shootouts. T. Higgins should be back here soon. And I think the other thing to talk about is I did get flamed on Twitter because I was like, man, I was watching the first half tweeting. This was on Thanksgiving night of like, man, this Chase Brown role is not good because it kept taking him off the field for Samaje Perine. Now, of course, very similar to the Bears game where they have 80 plays in this game. Not quite the 87 the Bears had, but when you have 80 plays, you can have bad usage and still get plenty of touches. So everyone in my comments by the end of the game was like, well, he has 22 touches. What are you talking about? Well, I think Dwayne puts it pretty well here, where you can see Chase Brown's role reduction in week 13 with the return of Samaje Perine. Bengals ran 80 plays masking the drop-off. Snaps in week 9 through 12, 89% to week 13, 59%. Then attempts, 83% down to 50%. His routes, 82% down to 62%. Targets, 21% down to 16%. So he goes from a guy who's like a back-end RB1 to probably more like a back-end RB2 moving forward. It's just not sustainable to run 80 snaps on offense every single game. In more normal games where they don't have the ball so much or when it's not such a high up-tempo game, you're going to see Chase Brown have more frustrating production like he did earlier in the year. Now, piggybacking on this, our 4th takeaway is Lamar Jackson is killing fantasy teams. And this one's really tough because what I mean by killing fantasy teams is you're never going to have the balls to sit Lamar Jackson, right? You're never going to have the balls to, if there's somebody else on your team, like even if it's like a Matthew Stafford or a Justin Herbert, maybe you drafted later on, or maybe not even Herbert, but I guess Herbert was getting drafted late, right? You could have like Herbert, you could have Stafford as kind of the late round quarterback options. And even then, you would have to have so much confidence to put one of those guys in your quarterback spot. So what's sort of happened here is he's been this silent killer where over the last 3 weeks, you've put him in your lineup and he's giving you less than 10 fantasy points, but never in your right mind could you justify not starting Lamar Jackson. You get what I'm trying to say here of he's too good to sit, but he's holding you hostage and you might have just lost like 3 of your last 3 because of him, right? When you draft an elite quarterback high and he doesn't produce, things get really tough. This is from Matt Harmon. Lamar Jackson's second worst, and 9th worst games by EPA per dropback from 2023 to 2025 have occurred in the last 3 weeks. He has scored single-digit fantasy points just 5 times in that span, with 3 coming in his last 3 games. So he's only done that 5 times. 3 of them have come in each of the last 3 games. I think there's a couple things here. I think one, you can say it was a little bit fluky where he had the touchdown to Isaiah Likely. He fumbles out the back of the end zone touchback. There was a big Zay Flowers OPI that could have been a touchdown. But I think at the end of the day, the important thing to know with Lamar is, yes, he could have had some passing touchdowns. Maybe he gets you to like 18 points or something like that, and that would have been fine. But I think this hamstring injury is probably worse than he's letting on. I don't know, because it's been so long. But maybe that's kind of, I want to say Mecca Buka also had a hamstring injury, just kind of tying it back up to the beginning of kind of these inexplicable fall-offs. Hamstring injuries are kind of no joke. Lamar Jackson this year has rushed for 50 or more rushing yards just 1 of 9 games. That's 11.1% of the time. He hasn't done it since week 1. Last year, he hit 50-plus rushing yards 9 times in 17 games for 52.9% of the time. He was hitting that mark 5 times more than he is this year. And then if you just want to look at his rushing yards per game year over year, 29.3 rushing yards per game would be by far his lowest ever in the NFL. As a starter, he's never had less than 50 yards rushing per game. So something's wrong. The rushing is low. It's tough. We're going to sit down and we're going to rank him for this next week. And I'll probably have him more as like a low-end quarterback 1, but I think it's going to still be tough to put him much lower. He's going to be at home versus Pittsburgh, who have been terrible. So I don't know. And again, it just becomes so tough to justify sitting him, because the minute you sit him is the minute he drops, a 30 bomb and looks fine. And even without 50 rushing yards in week 2 and week 3, he still had 4 passing touchdowns versus Cleveland, 3 passing touchdowns versus Detroit, and he put up 26 and 27 fantasy points before getting hurt versus KC. So I don't know. I wish I had something more definitive with Lamar Jackson, but the rushing floor is now gone. And when he's not throwing passing touchdowns, he hasn't thrown a single passing touchdown in each of the last 3 games. Things start to get tough. But we can then talk about our 5th takeaway. This one, look, we're getting towards the end of the year. There's only so many new things I can talk about. So this is more of like a theme of the week style takeaway. But and my bad for coughing all over the place in this video. But I told you guys last week, just a little bit sick, cold. It's that time of the year. We're talking for like an hour straight here. This was the week of the truthers, right? Dontavion Wicks was a guy honestly like truthers of this channel. Especially if you've followed me through Dynasty takes. Dontavion Wicks, I didn't love him coming out of school, but after his year 1, we loved him in year 2 last year. He's a complete dud. Instead, this week, he almost single-handedly wins the game versus the Lions. He scores 2 touchdowns. He's amazing. A.D. Mitchell, a guy I loved coming out of school. A guy on a per-out basis. He was crushing the rookie receiver report all last year. And kind of similar to Dontavion Wicks, of a guy who has strong per-out metrics, a guy who gets open at will, and then either drops or being buried on a deep depth chart, never really gets his shine. He goes to the Jets, somebody that was viewed as a throw-in that I, as a Jets fan, was stoked about when they got him as a throw-in, just as a team with a weak wide receiver room, and A.D. Mitchell with all the upside in the world. He looks amazing. He gets like 8 catches, over 100 yards. He scores his first NFL touchdown. Kamani Vidal, a dynasty darling a year ago, somebody that was getting drafted and redrafted a year ago, complete dud, complete zero. And then this year, has been pretty good in relief of Amarian Hampton. Yesterday, he ran wild for 20-plus points. Then we have Jalen Coker. He was somebody who I loved this year as a sleeper. We drafted him a ton on Underdog. Sadly, he gets hurt before week 1 and has kind of been climbing back since then. And then he looks amazing in a win against the Rams. And I have to think that this kind of solidifies his role moving forward in year 2. He's somebody, undrafted free agent at a Holy Cross, that we actually liked in Dynasty too, that could maybe now be a fun, he hits a bye week here, and then he's going to be in the Dome in New Orleans in week 15. Could Jalen Coker be a fun player down the stretch? We shall see. Of course, Treylon Burks scores the one-handed touchdown in the end zone last night for Washington. I don't know that he's going to turn things around like Quentin Johnston did, but Treylon Burks was a guy that we loved in that draft class. His numbers were great, and he just didn't pan out. He was a mega producer in the SEC. Things just didn't work out for him, but of course, he shows up in a big moment. Quentin Johnson scores a touchdown yesterday. So, like, all of these guys who kind of either fell flat on their face in year one or year two that a lot of the fantasy football community liked still and were believing in as kind of like late round dart throws either last year or years ago. Just a funny week where week 13, all of these guys came up big. Then we can talk about our sixth takeaway, which is just returns around the NFL. First, we have Brian Thomas. These are screenshots from PFF here where you can see Brian Thomas had 27 of 32 routes run. That's great. I will say that they won 25-3. They only had 23 targets available. I think that takes away throwaways from Trevor Lawrence. So 23 targets, 25-3 win. It's a little discouraging that Brian Thomas only had 3 targets and wasn't great, but it was his first game back in an uncompetitive game. I wouldn't freak out just yet. I think that it says a good amount that Jacoby Myers is kind of established as the wide receiver 1 for the time being, and then Parker Washington gets hurt in this game. So I don't know that I would take anything away from the Parker Washington side of things here, but maybe that's like kind of the perfect revolving door for Brian Thomas to emerge down the stretch here. Then we can talk about Isaiah Pacheco returning. JJ Zacharyson had this tweet. Isaiah Pacheco was back in week 13, but Kareem Hunt outsnapped him 42-20. Hunt ran 23 routes to Pacheco's 10. So Pacheco, first game back, wasn't going to be the lead back, but they love Kareem Hunt so much that I'm not sure Pacheco is ever going to be like the true lead back, must-start style player that we've been hoping for the last few years. So Pacheco, I wouldn't hold my breath, but he's working his way back in. We also have Marvin Harrison Jr. He returns for the first time. Ryan Heath has a tweet here. They were dead even at a 17.5% target share, but I will say Marvin Harrison Jr. ran less routes. He gets banged up in this game. We'll see what that means. I think it was like a heel injury or something, so that sucks for him. After appendicitis, after kind of like playing some good football here, he keeps getting banged up. I don't have anything there, but it is interesting where Michael Wilson has like 3 catches in this game. Complete dud on the week, but wide receivers are hot and cold. Like, I wouldn't completely rule out Michael Wilson as, okay, Marvin Harrison Jr. is back. He's never going to be startable. I think he's still a fine flex play moving forward in any game that Marvin Harrison Jr. is in, and a top 25 wide receiver in any game that Marvin Harrison Jr. sits out for. Terry McLaurin, last night in the primetime game, runs 32 routes. It's actually a lot. It's just that it was an overtime game, so there was plenty of snaps to go around. There was actually 90 snaps total for this Washington offense. He runs 32 routes. He gets 14 targets on 32 routes. That's almost a 50% target per route run rate. That's probably more like 40%, but he was a focal point. He played really well. He gets 7 catches, 96 yards, a touchdown. I think moving forward, McLaurin is going to get more worked in. And his kind of like, he was on a snap count, but we could see him moving forward where he kind of gets, back up to the top there. But they kind of rotated things throughout. Like, there were so many snaps in this game that Debo only ran 42 routes. So McLaurin only running 10 routes less than Debo tells me that next week or so, they should both be at the top of this list as the route run leaders at wide receiver. I think they're both just going to be fine, like wide receiver 3s moving forward without Jaden Daniels. We'll see if he comes back. Then we have Darren Waller here. Darren Waller, this is the Fantasy Life Utilization Report. You can see that he ran 69% of the routes. Really not that far off his week 5 number of 68%. In week 6, he ran 78%. Once he gets up to like 75%, 80% plus, he'll be a fine every week streamer, but I don't know that he'll catch that magic from like week 4 and 5 again, where he was like this. Is this guy going to be almost, I wouldn't call it league winner, but like an every week tight end 1? I think he's more of a streamer here on the back end of this injury, but they're getting him involved. I will say, I think that there's going to be a cap on his routes. 1, he already got injured earlier in the year, so maybe they don't want to use him as a full-time player. And 2, I think they like what they have in Greg Dulcich. Greg Dulcich still ran somewhere in like the 30% route share range in this game. We also have Bucky Irving return to play. Bucky Irving here from Ryan Heath had 81% of the running back rushes. He had both of the backfields carries inside the 10-yard line, a 7.1% target share. He had, I want to say, 19 touches here. He also scored a touchdown. He had, I think the final score on the day for him was 16 PPR points in his first game back. You take that all day long. Next up, he's going to be at home versus New Orleans. Then he's going to be at home versus Atlanta, on the road versus Carolina, on the road versus Miami. Those are 4 games. Not cakewalk per se, but none of those are elite defenses that are capable of stopping Bucky Irving in a meaningful way. And I think that we're going to see him get, he only had 52% of the snaps in this game. We should see that come back up as he progresses over the rest of the year. And that's very exciting because Bucky Irving, to me, is firmly an RB1 rest of this season. Then we can talk about the Bears offense, kind of just expanding on our Monangai talk of, I just said everybody eats in this Bears offense. It's tough. Like, you had 36 Caleb Williams pass attempts. The Eagles defense is really good. Don't get that twisted. The Eagles defense is great. They just made the Lions look bad a week ago in Philly on primetime. So something just to be aware of, that this is a good defense, but they just spread things so thin, right? 6 targets for Burden, 6 targets for Loveland, 5 for DJ Moore, 6 for Odunze. So when you have 32 targets to go around and nobody has more than 6 targets, it's just tough for Odunze to establish himself as like this alpha top 12 wide receiver like he was over the first 5 weeks. I just think that the season has progressed to this point. They've fully integrated Colston Loveland, fully integrated Luther Burden to, at least like 60% plus of the routes where they want them to be. They're winning games, kind of just playing team ball, and that's not good for fantasy football. So it sucks to see a team do well, win games, score points, and then your guy in Rome Odunze not getting there. But I think better days will be ahead for Rome Odunze, but I think it's just a little bit of a tease. As somebody that you drafted as a wide receiver 3, was a top 12 guy through 5 weeks, and since then has just been more of like a boom bust flex type of play. Then we can talk about some messy backfields as our 8th takeaway here. Chuba Hubbard from J.J. Zacharyson out-snapped Rico Dowdle 38-27 in Week 13. That was the first time he's played more snaps in a game than Dowdle since Week 8. Hubbard's 20.4 PPR points against the Rams were a season high, and it was the first time he scored more than 10 PPR points since Week 2. And what I'll say about that is I think this is now just a complete 50-50 split with some hot hand mixed up, right? Hubbard has the 30-yard receiving touchdown. Okay, you now have the hot hand, and you're going to get the slanted opportunity share towards Hubbard. In this next game, if Dowdle's the one who takes a swing pass for 30 yards into the end zone, this might be a 65-35 split in favor of Rico Dowdle. So it becomes a big headache for fantasy football. They're both going to be in a 50-50 split, and if one of them makes a big play or does better earlier in the game, then they're going to earn more opportunity for out. That is a big headache for us and what we do, but it's just kind of the reality of their situation. Then we talk about Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet. Sadly, things took a bit of a step back from Ryan Heath here. Of course, a week after Ken Walker saw season highs in every usage category and his coach said he'd earn more work, Charbonnet out-carries Walker for the first time since the bye week. Charbonnet also got both of the carries inside the 10-yard line, where Walker led 5-4 over the previous 4 games, and then Walker matched his season-high 15.4% target share, but that's a small consolation. So Walker gets downgraded, Charbonnet gets upgraded, and we are back to where we started as both of these guys in the RB3 mix in a given week. Maybe the usage had something to do with like killing the Vikings. Maybe like they lean into Charbonnet as the 2, right, where you want to keep Walker fresh for later on in the year, but that's just kind of me grasping for straws. I'd have to see the drive-by-drive data of like what the score was and kind of what the splits looked like throughout the game. Then you have the Cardinals split. I'm only really showing this one, the Trey Benson injury. I don't know what the hell is going on there, right? Like we've been told maybe like 4 weeks now that this guy's coming back. He has not been back. If you care, both of Michael Carter and Bam Knight get 10-plus PPR points. Bam Knight is still the preferred start, but both of these guys in a given week, if Trey Benson doesn't play, you could do worse than shoving one of these guys in your RB2 spot and just hoping something happens. Then we have the Steelers. Jalen Warren here kind of fights back against Kenneth Gainwell. His usage, when we look at the utilization score, right, that UR number, 42, then 55, then 66. He's been over 10 PPR points in 4 of his last 5, but he also hasn't hit 16 or more PPR points over that span. But we did see 56% of the snaps, his highest since Week 9. So Jalen Warren has kind of earned the lead job back, but the Steelers have been so bad it just doesn't really matter. We can talk about Breece Hall, our 9th takeaway here. Kind of an extension of the messy backfields is Breece Hall had amazing usage in this game. It kind of went under the radar, right? Only 14.6 PPR points, but 89% snap share here. You can see it all the way on the left. By far his highest of the year. 89% of the snaps. He had never been over 75% of the snaps before that. His previous high was 74% in Week 6. This is me showing you every game since Braylon Allen got hurt. He also had 90% of the rush attempts, He had 21 of 22 running back opportunities in this game. Isaiah Davis was a complete zero, and the Jets won at home. So it's great to have that positive reinforcement of the Jets won on the back of giving Breece this role. And I think that is going to stick throughout the rest of the season. And then my final takeaway, I hate to keep on talking about the Vikings, but this is a good lesson learned just for fantasy football in general, is no one is quarterback proof. And I know that sounds like common sense, but even Justin Jefferson, arguably the best wide receiver of his generation, one of the best. If you look at, if he has 90 career games played right now, I don't know what the exact number is. He probably has the most PPR points or the most receiving yards through a player's 90 career games. He is that guy. Like right now where he's pacing over his career, he usually leads all wide receivers. Now maybe that has actually slowed down because of how bad this stretch has been, but the Vikings passing game, this is their 17-game pace. 2,944 passing yards, 18 passing touchdowns, 27 interceptions. I pulled up a comparable season. So just to kind of get acquainted with what that quarterback quality truly means, 2001, the Cleveland Browns quarterback Tim Couch had 3,000 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, and only 21 interceptions, whereas the Vikings are on pace for 27 right now. So Jefferson, in terms of quarterback quality, is dealing with Tim Couch on the Cleveland Browns. That's really what he's dealing with. And in the past, I've thought back to the DeAndre Hopkins. He had like 1,400 receiving yards, 10-plus touchdowns with Brian Hoyer and a ragtag group of quarterbacks back in the 2010s. And that's like the year that I point to of like Hopkins did it with scrubs. But if you look at the quarterback stats from there, I guess you could really say like the only quarterback-proof season was Josh Gordon. If we just kind of want to go down memory lane here. But I talk about DeAndre Hopkins, but I look back and that team had like 29 passing touchdowns. So when you look at here and you get to 17 passing touchdowns and you get to 3,000 passing yards, stuff starts to get really tough. We look at Cleveland's overall. Yeah, so here's the thing. Like, even if you want to think back to Josh Gordon, that's kind of the crazy part here, is that you can be quarterback proof to a point, right? Josh Gordon made it work with this. Of course, Jason Campbell, Brandon Weeden, Brian Hoyer. That's brutal, but at the very least, compare their counting stats to that Vikings number up there. They had, this is a 16-game pace, 4,040 passing yards, 26 passing touchdowns, and 20 interceptions. So even with that terrible Cleveland Browns group, you're still talking over 4,000 passing yards, over 25 passing touchdowns. Right now, the Vikings are pacing for less than 3,000 passing yards, less than 20 passing touchdowns. That just can't fly for fantasy, and that is attached to Justin Jefferson. So, guys like Josh Gordon and DeAndre Hopkins have showed us the way where even with bad quarterbacks, as long as they're airing it out and kind of playing Jameis Winston ball, you can figure it out. But this Vikings team, the quarterbacks have been so bad. They've been playing conservative. They haven't been airing it out and kind of like there just hasn't even been the Jameis Winston. I'm talking about Jameis Winston ball because when you're talking about quarterback proof, that's what you need. You don't need a good quarterback. You need a quarterback who is going to, throw for 2 touchdowns, 3 picks, and 300 passing yards. That's what you're hoping for. But these box scores for the Vikings have been so bad. Like, we're talking 3 picks, no touchdowns, 160 passing yards. It's just not going to get done there. Similar to kind of what Cam Ward is doing on the Titans. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about quarterback proof. Can we hit the threshold of the Josh Gordon Cleveland Browns? The Vikings have not, and it's just made all of their pieces so frustrating. So if you're wondering why Justin Jefferson hasn't been producing, it's not because he isn't one of the 3 best at worst wide receivers in the NFL. It's because the passing numbers just aren't fertile enough is kind of what it comes down to. But that is it for today. That is my top 10 takeaways for Week 13 as we look forward to Week 14 of the fantasy season. As always, if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, oh.